Hi, this is Tignanelli, and I'm going to talk about the bad advice in the hallway of the retirement community, cafeteria, bad advice at the water cooler of your business. Most free advice is dangerous. So what am I referring to? So let's go down and let's talk about estate planning. This is an area that I see a lot where you're in the retirement community and somebody says, oh, you got to put your children's names on your house or on your investment accounts or on your bank accounts or whatever the case may be, because if you die, they're going to have to do all this stuff, and it's going to be horrible, and so forth. Or you have to put your name on joint, because if you need to go into nursing care, they're going to take all your money from you, because but if you have it in joint name, they can't do that, and so forth. And normally this advice is very bad. Okay, for example, let's say I'm a widow and I own a house, and I put the house in joint name, and then I die. Okay, what's going to happen is the children are going to get half of the house. Well, let's just assume you have one child. If you had more children, it would be even worse than this. But let's say you just had one child. Half of the house would be inherited tax-free, and the other half of the house will be taxable. If you want, I don't have time to go and explain all of this. It's called the step up in bases. But if you would have left that house in your name only, they would have gotten it 100% tax-free. If you want to avoid probate, then you put it into what's called, if I want to avoid probate, I put it into a life estate deed. And in some unique cases, like I live in Florida, you might want to, or you can use a revocable trust. But trust me, you want to make sure that you're using the one that's simplest, most logical for you in your circumstances. And getting free advice on that is not necessarily always a good thing. And this is where a comprehensive advisor comes in. Somebody who has no horse in the race, as they say, has no biases, but is trained and educated to explain what are the differences between doing this or that, et cetera, et cetera. Now, where is it a good idea to put joint names on an account? And this has its problems too. Nothing is perfect. A checking account is okay. Usually, let's do that in all capital letters, with a child or children. Some exceptions. One would be child may not be trustworthy. Two, child may keep money and not share with others after you pass. So these are the exceptions. So let's put that in there, that these are exceptions are. So those are some of the examples, but to get my point is that this is not simple stuff that you should just take some advice from somebody who either just made a rash decision themselves or got persuaded into doing something by somebody else and now thinks it's perfect for everyone. This is the point that I'm trying to make. Another category that is elder care. I've seen this a lot. You know, elder care is where you or your spouse are headed into a nursing home and you're terribly afraid that, you know, somebody, they're going to take all your money from you and so forth. And it's very possible that it can happen. But you know, what happens a lot of times is they get the hallway, whatever advice, and they say, you have to be broke in order to get help. Is that true? The answer is it depends. And there's lots of little situations where we can have a scenario where it's not true that you have to be broke. Matter of fact, the common situation in the federal government laws is if I'm married, I get to keep a house, I get to keep a car, and let's call it $145,000 or 50% of my assets, whichever is less. But that's just as simplistic. So right away, you see, it is not that you have to be broke if you're married. And with wise movements, you can protect a lot more money. So if you're going to give advice to people about this stuff, your best thing to say is, I have heard that there are things that you may be able to do if you have a spouse that's headed to a nursing home. You should contact an elder care attorney. You should contact an elder care attorney. You know, that's where you can get the advice that is necessary for your situation. Now, if you were living in a community like Oakcrest, as many of our Maryland residents know Oakcrest, or Charlestown, or Mercy Ridge. I didn't spell that very well. Charlestown or Mercy Ridge. You know, you theoretically, your contract says you've got to be broke before government will step in and help you, because that's the contract you signed with them. But there are even ways around those things if you know what you're doing and you consider the options that are available to you. There may be things that you can do. So do not assume that just because somebody told you something and the retirement community cafeteria, in the hallway of the retirement community or cafeteria, you know, just don't assume that it's true. That's the point of this seminar, is that there's a lot of bad advice. Let's go on to insurance. So you need insurance, and you talking to your buddy, and he says, "Oh man, you know, my buddy, he's a great, he's with State Farm, and you know, I've used them for years, and you know, it's great, you know, et cetera, et cetera." Well, so what? You know, do some research. There, you'll find that State Farm is at best, average company. You know, that there's usually other companies. There's times that Safe Farm could work out perfectly for you. I've seen that, but it's the exception. It's not the rule. And most insurance agents don't really care about doing risk management. Risk management. Risk management is understanding a risk, like liability. Let's just take like liability. Okay, liability risk. And it's saying, okay, how much can it be? How much can it be? How do I mitigate? How much do I need of insurance to protect what I have? And lastly, how much is it going to cost? So think about this. Let's take a liability risk of an auto accident, okay? So how much could it possibly be? Well, you know as well as I do, there have been some pretty big lawsuits out there for somebody who did something extremely negligent and caused a extreme amount of injury to a person. And the way they're going to look at this is they're going to say, what was the person's lost wages? Now if it's a 5-year-old, they're going to theoretically project what that 5-year-old could have earned over 60 or 70 years. I mean, it could be a big number. What's the pain and suffering of the situation? What is the permanency? Did they have an arm that's no longer eligible to be used as well as it could? Did it take away somebody's ability to enjoy an activity that they had, and so forth? So these are all the ways that they're going to determine. So you can see that it could easily be $5 million claims, would not be out of the range, and so forth. So how do I mitigate that liability? One, don't ever drive drunk under the influence of drugs or alcohol. So that's a big one that's going to rip into you with a settlement, and so forth. Second, how you hold your assets, because in a liability lawsuit, the only thing they're going to be able to get is those assets that are attachable, and there are certain assets that don't have access to attachment in a liability lawsuit, such as a 401k or a pension plan. I have a 401k worth, let's say, $1 million. If it's in the ERISA qualified 401k plan, there's a good chance they're not going to be able to touch it in a liability lawsuit. There's a lot of good reasons for that. If I have the asset held jointly, especially in what's called tenants by the entirety, those assets would not necessarily be attachable, because in order for somebody suing you for a liability risk, they have to prove that both people who own the account caused the injury. And if they can, then those joint assets may be attachable. But tenants by the entirety is a kind of unique ownership. It says that a marital unit owned that asset, and that marital unit had to cause the injury, and therefore, it can be attached, and so forth. So there's all kinds of different ways to help mitigate the risk, but the main one is to drive safely and to be cautious and careful about how you drive and what you do in driving and so forth. But how much insurance do I need? Well, it comes down to what is my net worth. My net worth is 600,000. I probably need about a $500,000 liability policy. So you say, wait a minute, the claim could be as high as 5 million. Well, yeah, but you see, lawyers understand that they can only get what they can get, and that they're not going to pursue legal court actions to potentially get a settlement. You might have been able to win a case against somebody worth $25 million. You might have been able to win a case of $5 million settlement. But if you don't get to court to get to that place that somebody says, yeah, your suit is worth $5 million, you may have to settle for a number a lot lower. So just because your settlement might be worth a lot of money, there may be realistically only so much money you can get, because there's just, it's like the old can't get blood out of a turnip. I don't even know where that came from and why turnips would even be considered to have blood, but maybe that's the point of the saying, you can't get blood out of a turnip. So if you have $600,000 net worth, you may only want a $500,000 liability policy. If I'm worth $20 million, I might want a $5 million umbrella liability policy. I don't want to take the chances that somebody could potentially come and attach those assets or pursue me in a lawsuit and I have to pay for an attorney to defend me, I want to make sure that I have the maximum amount of protection possible. And then, can I afford it? And keep in mind that a $5 million liability policy, personal liability policies, probably only going to cost about $1,000 a year. So, people are worth a lot of money. It's a very simplistic decision to spend $1,000 or so to protect the net worth that they have. So, you go to the water cooler and they say, oh, my buddy, State Farm, whatever. And the point is that most insurance agents don't do risk management. Life insurance agents typically do not do risk management. Life insurance agents are designed to try to make a living for themselves, and they have to sell the stuff that they, are going to make money on, and not necessarily worry about the risk management that you need to be concerned with. Medicare and Social Security. This is some of the worst advice that people are giving out freely to people. I can't tell you, every week probably, or month at the very least, I get at least 1, 2, 3 questions from somebody who says, it always starts out like this. I heard, or my friend said, or, John Doe, who's really knowledgeable about these things, said, and, once in a while, it's, I say, oh, there's some validity to that, but I can't, honestly, the majority of the time, it is just bad, dangerous advice. And, Medicare, a classic example of this. Some people are ready to turn 65. I'm turning 65 in a month and a half from now. So, when I turn 65, I can go on Medicare. But if certain circumstances, I may not want to go on Medicare. If my company is still providing medical insurance for me, and my company is a company that has a medical insurance plan that would be considered a Medicare qualified policy, that I could get a special enrollment period in the future. Okay, so let's say I worked for IBM and I have medical insurance and I'm turning 65 and I have no intention of retiring until I'm maybe 72. Okay, that's when I intend to retire, when I'm 72. Because I have medical insurance with IBM, and because IBM obviously has more than 20 employees, I can bypass Medicare Part B, which is going to cost me almost $200 a month, something in that ballpark. I can bypass that. I can say, I don't want that right now because I have medical insurance. And then I can pick it up when I'm 72. So you may or may not need Medicare Part B at 65. And it depends on, depends on if I have medical insurance with a company with 20 or more employees. Now that 20 or more employees is not literal, but the 20 or more employees creates an atmosphere with the medical insurance policies that you have are more than likely going to be eligible for what's called the special enrollment period in the future. So, I have that, my client works for IBM and plans to retire at 72. Okay, so they can wait on Medicare B until 72 and get a special enrollment period when they retire without penalties. So why do they penalize you? Well, think about it. You know, Medicare Part B costs 200, let's say $200 a month. And if you could wait to sign up for Medicare Part B until you need to go see a doctor, you know, you could save boodles and boodles of money a month until you need to see a doctor. And then before you go see the doctor, sign up for Medicare Part B and say, hey, I went to see the doctor. And Medicare Part B says, well, wait a minute, we have a penalty for you trying to do that to dissuade you from making that kind of manipulative move. So that's why the penalty is there. But since I had a medical plan, I wasn't trying to cheat Medicare. I had a plan. I shouldn't have to pay twice for something that I don't need. And they say, that's fine. You know, you'll get a special enrollment period when you turn 65, okay? Or when you turn 72 and retire. Now, you have to understand, Medicare Part B is for doctors. Medicare Part A is for hospitals, okay? Now, Medicare Part A is a unique situation. Medicare A, you paid for in taxes since first day of work. So all those taxes they took out of your paycheck since the very first day you went to work, those taxes paid for Medicare A, which is hospitals. Let's put that in there. Okay. Medicare B is doctors. All right. So you pay tax, so it's free, right? Sort of free. You pay taxes and you're still paying taxes. So why would you take Medicare Part A? Or why would you not? The only reason you would not sign up for Medicare Part A at 65 years of age is because you have a health savings account and you want to contribute to. If you sign up for Medicare Part A, no longer you can't do this anymore. If sign up for Med A, you must stop. Right? Okay. What if you don't? If you don't have, if no HSA, and watch this, it always changes it to has. That's always funny, isn't it? Nothing like spell check. If not HSA, you should apply for Medicare A because it supplements your company plan. Now, if you ever had big doctor's bills, hospital bills, I should say, Medicare A will be there to help you with those. So that's when you should be signing up for Medicare and so forth. Now, what about Social Security? Social Security, I see so many people make bad decisions on Social Security. People always want to sign up for it as soon as possible. Our simple advice is this: highest earning spouse waits to age 70 and lower earning spouse takes at age of full retirement, which for everyone is a little different, right? So you got to go to the Social Security website and figure out what your full retirement age. But for most people now, it's going to be 66 and a half months of age for 67. I mean, that's the simplicity of it, you know, now that most people who are 66 right now are already approved for their full retirement age. But for the average person, it's going to be, you know, if you're born my year, it's 66 and a half, you know, 66 and 6 months. If you're a year older than me, then it's 66 and 10 months. And if you're a year older, then it's 67. So it's basically, let's call it 67. The lower earning spouse always takes at full retirement age. The higher earning spouse waits to age 70. And if you're single, you're probably best to take it at 67. Now, that is really general. You really need to be talking to somebody who understands Social Security inside out and understand your situation inside out to be able to apply that, either that general theory and say, yeah, this works for you, so you should be doing this, or no, this doesn't work for you. What would change our mind? Some exceptions, right? We always have exceptions. Some exceptions. I should learn how to type better. Some exceptions would be low life expectancy. That would make a difference. Low amount of assets to live on until Social Security kicks in. Those are two classic ones that would make us pause, think about it, and say, no, maybe we need to claim sooner. There's all kinds of reasons that you would want to claim sooner than later. Those are two classic ones. And lastly, let me just talk about tax planning. I get this all the time too, that, TurboTax is simple and great. You know how many times I review TurboTax returns for clients at no cost? We always do TurboTax returns or whatever. If you get somebody else do your return, TurboTax do your return, we review those at no cost. And I find 25% or more seriously wrong. Why? Because people are putting information into TurboTax, assuming the TurboTax is omniscient, and getting a printout back out and looking at it and saying, well, okay, that's what TurboTax says. But if you don't understand what the numbers were that you put in and what you should likely receive back, chances are that TurboTax is going to make a mistake. Now, if all you had is a salary and nothing else, I mean, TurboTax is a perfect, simple solution. And even then, it can be complicated. Like, for example, let's say your first year of graduating from college, you get a job, you work from July until December, you make $35,000. Mom and dad make $145,000, and mom and dad have always taken you on their tax return, and they decide, they're going to take you on their tax return in the last year. And so you let TurboTax do it all. Mom and dad do it, you do it, everybody's happy. But that year, mom and dad's income shot up to about 190. Dad got a nice bonus that year, or mom worked more that year, et cetera, whatever the case may be. Their income shot up to 190. And next thing you know, mom and dad are happy because the tax return says they're getting a refund. And the child's happy because tax return said they're getting a refund. And it's pretty simple. Mom and dad didn't make any serious money, and they didn't have any complexity. Child didn't have anything complex either. It's just simple K1. And next thing you know, they probably just left $2,000 on the table or more. It just depends on the year and the situation. Why? Well, because there's a critter in there called the American Opportunity Tax Credits, $2,500. And the parents knew they would get it, but they didn't get it this year, but they didn't know why. They just didn't get it. They didn't think anything of it. They saw it in the past, but they put the information in, but the tax return said they didn't get it this year. No big deal, you know, TurboTax is right. But what they didn't realize is that their child could have filed that tax return and gotten that tax credit themselves. And that would have been a mistake, even though it was a relatively simplistic return. Let me tell you, taxes have become so convoluted and so complicated that unless you had an artificial intelligence computer taking every core, piece of information that could possibly impact the tax returns, like for example, they could be a dependent on mom and dad's return, or they could be their own dependent. The artificial intelligence machine would need to know all of that to be able to pull that information together and say, wait a minute, this would work best in this scenario over here. But that's not how things are done. It still takes human brain power to, look at the situation and say, wait a minute, in this situation, I want Janie to claim herself, and mom and dad, for this reason, you can't be doing this anymore. Anyway, these are just some of the things that I find. I had a whole bunch more I could do, but I don't want to make this too long. I just want to get the point across that most free advice is dangerous. And, people are very willing to share advice. If people share advice, I would suggest this. This is something that worked for me, but make sure you have a competent, comprehensive advisor who can honestly look at this and see if it works for you. We should make sure that anyone giving out free advice should give a disclaimer. Make sure you find somebody who understands Medicare and Social Security, before taking anything I say to you to heart. Don't put your children's names on accounts until you have somebody thoroughly understands your situation and the what can happen. One thing I never mentioned about with the joint account thing, they say you put your child's name on joint name on your house or on a brokerage account or whatever, and that child is married, and then all of a sudden they get divorced. So if that divorcing spouse wants to, they could argue that half interest in that asset with mom or dad is potentially a marital asset that should be considered for the divorce. So, be careful with those kinds of things, not knowing what traps might be out there. Point is, most free advice is dangerous unless you truly understand the circumstances of each individual. That's the point of the show. Thank you.